Questions from the floor? I'm sure there's a lot of questions. Yes. Yes.
So, thanks a lot for your presentation. In economics, we spend a lot of time in trying to find or to search causal relations of the different factors we try to bring together. Sorry. And so my question is more or less, is your experimental work in one sense also causal? And are your field experiments especially linked to this causal analysis we try to do in micro or in macro especially? And did you change the game more or less for what you do in your different experiments? And why do you fix it especially to developing countries? We could also easily imagine to do exactly the same for developed countries.
That's so many questions, and I can't possibly answer all of them. Let me start with the last one, which is that why do I do it in developing countries? It's cheaper. I don't have that much money. I need to do it in a place where the rewards make any sense to people, and it makes a huge difference. It's a lot cheaper, and I grant you everything else. I do it. I do believe that people are more or less these same behavioral patterns I'm going to find in the US, and people do some experiments now using the internet and using people on Mechanical Turk, and they find similar patterns. But it's just, if you want to do experiments where there are real choices being made and real behaviors, then costs just are astronomical for doing it in rich countries. Just we couldn't do it. Oh. I mean, I guess all the experiments have both kinds of points being made. There are points being made about interpretation, which is what I spent today about. But there was I also told you that there was a causal effect on how many children got immunized. So I think this opposition is not one that I have any particular, I've never thought it was a very useful opposition between causal and non-causal. I think we interpret everything. Some things are useful to pin down in terms of experimental estimates because we want to feel empowered to talk to the world about it, that when we want to change policy, when we want to be reasonably confident. But do I not update from things which are not experimental? Of course, if I stumble on the road 3 times, I will avoid that road. So it's not, there is no one who is fully committed to only being experimental.
Other question? Can I ask first one, two? Can I ask you, Claude Diebold? I didn't ask him, but everybody knows Claude. Can you ask your name before the question, please?
Yeah, okay. I'm Antoine Aymon. Thanks for the presentation. I was just wondering about your position between gossip and centrality. Can't we imagine a concept of gossip centrality with heterogeneous probabilities to pass the information?
We could. We wouldn't know how to identify it from the data, because the network data doesn't tell us anything about the probabilities. It just says who's in a better position to pass on information. Network data doesn't come with probabilities. It just comes with 1, 0. I'm connected to Agnes, but I'm not connected to X. That's just how the data is reported. So I wouldn't know from that. I could get some third party's estimate of a probability of communication, but this is both much less solid information. It's, do they talked once or they talk 1,000 times a week? I have no idea. And second, even if I had that, I wouldn't know whether or not how to relatively weight that across people. Maybe we talk because I say hi every time I pass the person at the door, but it doesn't mean that we are friends. It's a good question, but I do think that...
There was a question in the back. Yes, first in the back, and then 2 here.
Thank you. Raja Shakir from INRA. I was wondering, you're focusing on the number of people getting the information. I was wondering if you had an idea on the quality of information, depending on it is the centered person or the gossip person who is diffusing the information. As all we know that there is a lot of loss of information when we are communicating. Thank you.
So yes, I didn't show you that picture, but the third graph of the three was the one where we just measure knowledge directly, and the answer is, again, you get a substantial improvement in knowledge from exactly the same intervention. So the intervention that has broadcast no common knowledge and seeding common knowledge make people more informed, the other two less so. So we have a whole section where we measure exactly what people know on these questions of demonetization.
Akiko Shua, about this gossip, is it a once and for all recipe? Because once you give them the gossip as kind of social status, is it replicable in the long term? That first question. And the second, why wouldn't they use this information strategically? So give some information, but not all.
So I think that if the information actually had lots of, private benefits, I don't know the answer to that question. I think the question you're asking, once I'm not thinking of a world, I'm thinking of a world where the information is a public good. It's just every child can get immunized. Would you want your neighbor's child to get immunized? So I don't think there is any reason to think about that kind of strategic. What I'm worried about is less that. I'm worried about just people's willingness to do the job. And the answer is, there are some people who love to do this job because it gets them the opportunity to go and tell people, you guys, you haven't been doing your job. You haven't taken your children to immunize. They can go hector people and yell at them and advise them and generally feel important. So there are many people who for one reason or another like to talk, including me. And so I think those people are usable. So I don't think that they need to be given special status. It's just give information to people and don't attach any rewards to it. I think this is the whole point, is that this is not rewarded, it's public goods. Don't make it like, you get a prize for this or something. It's just, this is, you're free to not pass it on. I think those people, there are people who couldn't keep, there's an expression in Bengali, which is that if you have information, your stomach feels hotter. Yeah.
Il y avait une... Voilà, là, s'il vous plaît. Merci.
Thanks. I'm Marie Lalanne. I had a question related to a previous question, but to be more specific, isn't there a trade-off between the number of seed people and the quality of information that is being transmitted? So you suggest that only giving the information to a few people would be less costly than giving the information to everyone. But I guess probably there's some loss of information. The last person at the end of the chain probably get the information very distorted. So isn't it there a trade-off between targeting maybe a number of people versus quality of information?
Maybe. I can tell you that the outcome is very clearly that that if you do seed common knowledge, you get much better outcomes than broadcast common knowledge. So sure. maybe that doesn't exclude what you said, which is it could be that some people who are particularly disadvantaged inside the network don't get the information, and it would be better to broadcast for them. So I think that's a perfectly valid concern, which is that maybe if you are in the periphery of the network, you don't get information through the network. I think that's a concern we're worried about, and I think there is some plausibility to it. The average effect is very clear.
But in terms of the quality of the information?
Well, the quality of the information is measured by, we actually measure the quality of information because we know what they know. We ask them questions, and we know what choice they make. And so in both of those measures, they do much better. So it's not, I mean, there might be other measures of quality. I think it's not so much the quality that I'm worried about. I'm worried about the distribution, that there are people who will be excluded.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have one question. What is the link of this last theory that you explained and informational cascade literature?
So the informational cascade literature has the idea that, I mean, in a sense, it's a very Bayesian literature, where you use a lot of this, the awareness of what, if other people have not chosen something, why didn't they choose it? And so I think what this evidence is suggesting is that people are less sophisticated than that. That these kinds of second, third, or fourth order thoughts are relatively rare. That's I think, as someone who's partisan to the information cascade literature, I don't find this encouraging, but I think it's true.
And I have another question, if there are no questions from the floor. What is the link, in the first part of your talk, what is the link between this informal social network that you are dealing with and the requirement for a social planner or formal institutions?
So there's several different issues there. One is the one I briefly mentioned, which is whether bilateral choices will generate an optimal network. And I think the answer is no. I think you have to have very strange kind of combinatorially complex pricing, which is where I have to reward you for making friends with X and Y, but not with P. That kind of pricing seems ridiculous, so I don't believe it. So if you, now, more generally, it seems like a lot of the links people form for no particularly good reason. That doesn't mean that they don't make strategic links. So in some sense, I'm not sure the question of the social planner is first order here. In some sense, I don't think the world is one where I can't even think of a plausible mechanism through which... You mentioned it. I did mention it, and that's why I said that there is a set of theorems which say the social planner will have to do very complicated things to do it. My general instinct is that I find equilibrium interesting and optimality of the network uninteresting. As a fact, that doesn't mean that there isn't a large literature on it, and with a different audience and different time, I could say a lot about it, but I think the first order fact is that I would think of non-designed networks. That networks are not really designed. They are somewhat intentional, but not designed.
Okay. Yes, another question here. Il y en a deux. On prend le temps pour deux questions. Oui?
So, thank you, Flora Bellon. I wanted to have your view on all these agent-based modeling in another part of the literature that try exactly to make some assumption and deal with the issue relevant for, more macro-oriented issues.
I'm sympathetic. I think that basically here's what I don't understand. I don't understand how exactly yet to impose discipline on that process. So, but the general thought that we over design individuals is clearly right. That we can just have them make some, broad rule of thumb, and that's somewhat optimized. That seems right to me. What the discipline on that literature is, how far can I go and say that I have still, how much parameterization am I allowed to do without saying that I'm sort of choosing my answer? That's a question that I don't know the answer to.
Il y avait une autre question au fond.
Just about your work on microfinance, you said that those who are deprived of microloans and you said something that is not causal or something, but being deprived of something, it can have an impact of your social life. You have this work by Leiersfeld in the 30s about unemployed in Marienthal. So maybe I just didn't get it.
I was saying something much less deep than that. I was saying that this is a difference in difference estimate. You could say I have villages before and after. Some got microfinance, some didn't. I don't have 10 years of pre-trend, so I cannot say that these were on parallel trends and then they deviate. So you can interpret this as causal or not. I'm just telling you what happened. So think of it as being, there was some part of this might very well be a result of a pre-trend. Now, having said that, what I think is interesting is not that the overall impact, but who gets impacted. And the wrong people get, I mean, one that's interesting is that when microfinance enters, the people who, a certain set of people who have no access to it, whom you think will be completely unaffected. They live in their own world, and in that world, everything is fine. But that's not true. Their world gets destroyed by the entry of a product that they have no access to. And that's something in general, that general thought is a thought about the design of the network, that the network is not designed. Therefore, even though I think that this intervention only affects 10% of the population, and therefore it's okay, in fact, there are spillovers all through the network.
But does this has to do with the difference between monetary structures and social or traditional or institutional or historical structures? Is it a link between the two? Is it the fact that microfinance brings in monetary relationship, or is it just a new object, as you just said?
Yeah, I think of it as, it's a very good question. I think of it as mostly just a new object. These are villages which are, within 100 kilometers of Bangalore. They have they're in the monetary economy densely. I think, of course, the social structures are important. Don't have to be pure to be important. They are social structures which live inside a monetary economy. But I don't think it's because this was monetary that it was important. I think if there was a sport where some people were invited and others were not, that could also have the same effect. So I don't believe that this is because it's money that's somehow polluting. I think it's because it's fundamentally, it's the nature of networks that they're not designed, and because they're not designed, accidents here have consequences there.
Aisha Bindia, did you, just jumping on that last question, did you have, does it matter that then L types are hurt more than H types? That's the first question. And the second is related to an earlier example you gave us. You said it's all rationalized by the fact that some people might be shy of asking. But do you have evidence for this mechanism?
Yes, so I didn't have time to talk about it. Let me answer the second question. The first question I didn't quite understand. Let me answer the second question. There is another paper which Arun and Ben Golab have, and a third person whose name escapes me, where they actually, our experiment is very much a field experiment where there is like real policy consequences. This is a lab experiment where they actually ask people, give people information, and then say that, well, if you can complete this whole picture, then you get some money, and it's all inside a lab, so it's all, they control every aspect of it, and they can see that how every action everybody's taking. They can see who's asking questions and all those things. And they see that the number of people who are particularly, the people who have hard time understanding, they have some measure of it, are the ones who don't ask questions. So there's actually direct evidence of the causal pathway. I would have had more time, I would have talked about that paper. It's very nice also.
Other questions?
Hi, Clémence Tricot. I have a question regarding the negative effects on the low types. Could it be also that with the introduction of the microfinance institutions, now they learn that they are low types, and people around them now view them as low types, and maybe they want less to be friends with them, even between low types?
Maybe. I mean, I think that mostly the rules of the microfinance have to do with whether or not you have a woman who's between 18 and 55 in your household or not. So, and things like that. So it doesn't jump out at me, but yes, it could be.
We have to stop now, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was a great talk.